Hi everybody, I'm Brandon Jones and we're here today to talk about the Deep Down trailer. And I will let these guys introduce themselves and explain what they do here at GT.
Hi, I'm Marco Rosado, graphics guy for the company.
I'm Dan Raxon. I'm Marco's graphics assistant.
And And I'm Leland Russell. I am a graphics contributor in the dynamics special effects part of our graphics department.
And all you guys had a hand in the Kingdom Hearts timeline trailer that you put together. You guys kind of co-opted on that. So, we have lots of conversations about, the new exciting stuff that these guys are doing with bringing, some genuine, authentic CG work to our pieces. And this is a great piece of CG right here that we're going to talk about. Well, the point is that we don't know. So
Real-time CG.
So we just want to take some time to go through the trailer in real time and talk about what we're taking a look at here. So, let's kick it off. So, basically, this game is now officially the Killzone 2 of the PlayStation 4. So, the PS3 is announced. We see this image for Killzone 2 that none of us are really sure if it's gameplay or not, and we didn't find out until much, much later. So, the point of this is really to focus on what we know, if this is really this engine running, and if it is, what are some of the arguments for and against it. So, anything with this guy right out of the gate that we want to talk about?
I'd say a lot of it looks relatively feasible. I mean, when they first introduced Gears of War, they had a lot of a look like this, where it seemed very post-processed and a lot of detailed normal mapping on the individual and a lot of like blown out highlights. Anything with like a reflective surface creates a specular, and they soften it and blur it throughout the entire thing, which creates it's an amazing look, but it's definitely a cheat.
Yeah, it eliminates a lot of detail in the render.
Mm-hmm.
But that you would say would be maybe evidence that what we are seeing is done
it's feasible.
in an engine.
Yeah,
No, there's no question this is an engine. It is real time. It's just, they have their bag of tricks to be able to run this in real time.
So we got this kind of a border on the top of his helmet going down his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I don't know, is that something coming off the heat or the fire or something?
They're compositing layers. Like the hardware rendering is split up into layers, and then they bring it back together and composite it real time. I'm not surprised by this after seeing the Unreal 4 demo.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is cinematic, though. I don't know if that's gameplay.
I think that graphics have gotten to a point now that our cinematics are the same almost as our gameplay.
Like, I would believe at some point that this was played somewhere internally at Capcom. Like, there are guys playing through this little level and fighting this dragon, but like what we're looking at here necessarily, I don't know.
I don't think that's the game. If you go later on, you start to see certain things that stick out to me, like they don't look right. Like the way the depth of field works in some of the shots, you see like a hard edge around the characters, which is something we see a lot when we're compositing our effect shots. We're using a separate layer for the depth channel, which saves us time in rendering, because you're just rendering out a ramp, a value, a black and white value map for the camera to decipher the depth, and then you apply that on top. To give you your depth. It's kind of a cheat, but the downfall of doing that is when you look at the characters that are in the foreground, since you're using a black and white map to separate out those areas, and there's a very short fall off for anything in between that black and white, and when you blur that on top of your image, you get that hard edge. You can't soften that back up, and you start to see that in some of the shots coming
it looks like a cutout.
Yeah, and that might be also what this is here. He's in the foreground, and we see that a lot when we do our graphics. So.
The layers are always going to be there. I don't think the character or the background are ever present together. They're being calculated as separate entities, because one is being dynamically moved and calculated for, and the other one can be semi-pre-rendered to a certain degree, as far as like backgrounds and things that aren't being manipulated. So the detail difference is there, and they're using depth of field and layers now to kind of cheat that as far as texture detail, and that's really what it boils down to, is how much texture detail can you show, and they break it down to what's closest to the camera, what is right in front of your face is going to have the highest resolution, and whatever's furthest is going to have the lowest resolution.
That actually brings up a point, kind of one of the next things I wanted to get to, which is focus. And there's a lot of, how this trailer looks very different depending on what we're focused on. Like, this fire kind of comes in out of focus, and later when the guy's going through with the torch, maybe I can just jump to that moment. we get a change in focus. Is that something that you think is kind of unexplored in games, Marco? Are they just like teasing with us, or is that something that maybe we can see happen more? On the fly in cutscenes, like.
Well, like I mean, gameplay wise, I mean, I'm sure like people messing with mods and games that don't really have focus effects, and they add them on like
here specifically, just like
on post. Like focus is not something that games really need when you're actually playing a first-person view, because depending on where your cursor's at, that's where the camera's focusing to, and sometimes that's not really where your eye is, even though the cursor of the camera, the center of the camera is. So, yeah, let's say like I'm looking at this like as a player in a game, and my cursor moves over that icicle, and it focuses on the icicle, but I really want to see what's behind the icicle.
Sure.
So it's really something used for cinematic purposes. I don't think it's something that games should really use in real time as you're playing.
Maybe if you like have a bow and arrow and you want to target somebody, like it kind of blurs out.
Yeah,
like
for
Gears
little
does
effects like that. Yeah, that's for there it works, but not like I think it's kind of overused here. But again, this is a cinematic trailer for the most part, so.
So the big thing that I think it takes kind of center stage in this whole piece is fire. We should definitely spend a lot of time talking about that. You were saying some interesting things, Lee, about just what fire is and how that's done in 3D.
Right.
Like how is fire a presence in a 3D environment? Like how is this pulled off?
Yeah, it's basically they use what is called like a voxel system, which is just a three-dimensional cubic system, and the more detailed and smaller the cubes, just like pixels, the more it can think about the objects in front of it. So in this shot, right, it's coming at it in a straight line, and then it hits the voxels, and it's basically particles that then figure out like we need to go around this what is considered a solid object in 3D and manipulate a situation around it, and then you would create shading textures on top of that, like this particle represents this part of the fire, and and the more detail you have, the more detailed your fire can be, and then they use incandescence, and I'm assuming they must have to a certain degree pre-rendered calculations for what the fire looks like at certain points, and we go back to the dragon when he spits onto the ground, and this is obviously speculation that it's pre-calculating the ground before it hits, and then the wall starts to come up, pre-calculating the wall that's going to be up in front of it as the fire comes out. If you frame by frame it, you can see it's flat
before
it comes out, and then the wall.
See that frame there?
Yeah. I mean, that would just be, the fluid trying to pre-calculate the objects in front of it so that it can have a proper animation around it. So because it's coming out real quick. I mean, when you watch this in real time, you don't even notice it, but then you look at it here and you're like, yeah, it's flattening out. I mean, the wind is obviously explained for that, but that flat bottom doesn't make any sense.
But that's one thing I think we should bring up too, is that I was extremely skeptical of this, but I mean, I remember being in the room when Killzone 2 happened, and I was surrounded by people who were like, oh, that was really cool. I'm like, that was so blatantly computer animation, and we found out later it was from start to finish.
Right.
And so it is hard for me in my brain to accept these moments, but this does kind of speak to what you guys are saying, which is that this is in-engine, because if this was something that was that big of an announcement, like they would, try to clean stuff like this up. If they, could possibly. And I think there's some other stuff where some rocks that disappear that we can maybe bring up later and some other elements. I think the thing that's really exciting for me that they're trying to convey is that normally you kind of get the straight jet from a dragon. It's kind of like I'm going to spit a fireball out, and that's going to go from point A to point B pretty much in a straight line. And here this definitely has weight. Like it kind of seems like it kind of, barfing is the only word that my brain is coming up with right now. It just kind of spits it out, it hits the floor, and then spreads out from there.
And I mean, the term in 3D is fluids.
Right.
Everything in that effect is technically a fluid just moving at a more rapid rate. You would adjust the gravity and basically turbulence, and then obviously it has its own impacts and it reacts to that, but it's like real lightweight fluid basically flying out of his mouth. That's how it calculates.
They have heat maps, so it can depending on how long it lives, it dissipates in heat and color.
Incandescence, transparency, everything adjusts based upon a heat calculation in the 3D program.
And just getting again into the gameplay argument, where I'd be very surprised this is gameplay, but kind of with the character advancement stuff we've seen in the Uncharted series, a little interesting that he reacts instantaneously, the fire hasn't even shot out of his mouth, and the guy's already brings his hand up to kind of, oh, that was a loud noise, oh, I'm dodging the fire, and clearly that's not something you could do in a game or react that quickly. So it's interesting that the guy, is sensitive to sound, sensitive to heat, and is clearly, just crapping in his shorts right now with all the fire going. It's like, is that going to affect gameplay? Is that going to make me slower? What if I just suddenly moved him in another direction? Would he break out of that animation? Would that be fluid?
Yeah, like if you started like jittering, like moving the stick back and forth on the game, he would start like doing that.
Yeah.
Like, would that make sense? Like, no, but.
And I don't think for this, like what they're showing, I don't think that in this game you have control over this guy during this. If this is a quote unquote gameplay, I think a lot of this, like when they click over to the guy shooting the arrow, that's clearly all cinematic.
And that HUD is obviously
right.
Not.
Yeah.
That's totally like not it.
Well, there's other HUD elements to consider. It's like, you know, I would like to know that I just expended one arrow. You know, like I'd like to know that how many arrows I have,
or how much life I've got going against this dragon,
or what. You know, it's like this is a fire arrow. Like, did I light that fire on something, or is that the quote unquote fire arrows in my inventory? How did I access that?
But it makes no sense.
What target am I aiming at here? Like,
but I think that the other thing you have to say is this could be just this animation playing out on. You know, the engine.
Sure. Oh, no, and I think that's the verdict that we're going because there is no truth. There's no way to know. I mean, if we do find out, it's not going to be for several months or even years. So
there are two things.
Surprised.
Yeah, there are two things that you gotta take into consideration whenever talking about demos like these, like on first gen, next gen stuff. You know, these are running on without the game running under it.
Right.
Like, this is just a graphics demonstration. There's no like AI running in the background. There's none of that stuff. So that really taxes the CPU like on any piece of software. But the second point I want to bring up is that this demo was not made with the final PS4 specs.
Sure.
Which, according to every report out there, when they were announced at the conference, even some developers were surprised. It has more RAM. It's faster. So if the final PlayStation 4 actually turns out to be more powerful than what they used to create this, then who knows what they're going to do with the final specs.
And this is the biggest flaw. This explosion you're showing. I think if you're going to call it a flaw, and fellow graphic men or women, I'm sorry, but the smoke is completely composited in.
We start here with the the arrow hasn't hit.
And then the column changes into a braking column, and then it goes complete diffused lighting as if it's lit from a globe, a light globe in it. And
so tell me to stop. What do you think is the worst offender?
Go next. Right when the smoke just shows up, and it's just like, where's all that light coming from? And then you can tell just transparency's out.
The smoke doesn't have self-shadow either, so it looks very flat.
Right.
Normally smoke has cast shadow on itself. So
that smoke was
a thicker, more full look to it.
Yeah, it was created just the way like smoke is created nowadays in games. It's just like animated,
it's
like
a composite.
Composite. That's just canned, and every explosion would look like that in theory if this is what they're going for.
Right. And you notice a lot throughout this, if I'm going to point out the lighting in it, is that it blows out all the time. They overexpose constantly. I mean, even when that guy pulled that arrow
I was
around
just
the
actually
corner,
going to point that out right at the beginning of the shot, right when we first see him. It's like somebody's got a flashlight on him or something.
Yeah, I was going to say whose fire looks like that.
What is what is that? What's the right next to his? It's like he actually moves the arrow closer to the column, but the light goes away. It's like what's reflecting off of that so bright.
And why? I don't know. A lot of this seems like cutscenes in actual gameplay.
But I mean, the one another thing too that speaks to this could possibly be a gameplay demo is there's nothing. I mean, it's a human and a elf and a dungeon with a dragon. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you were to test a new engine, it would make a lot of sense that you're like, well, I have a little campfire area with a third character who's got an interesting looking face that we can render, and then I'll have a little hallway and then this completely wide open environment. So for testing this, let's blow up some columns. Let's try to knock out the ceiling. Maybe that'll bring some light in because it looks like it's obviously day because the sunlight's going to come
It looks
outside.
like a tech demo for sure.
So yeah, it feels like that. It's not something where like I don't think they're trying to pass off that this is an actual level or anything.
No.
Right.
Why would they put that HUD?
The HUD, I feel like the HUD was a last
minute
thing because there's nothing in the
before.
gameplay for me that seems to like, I'm missing something. I need to see the HUD there. I think the HUD was put afterwards because there's some weird shots like, who are we? Like we got the arrow up here, so obviously the other guy's playable too, I'm assuming. So, but they haven't said anything about co-op or multiplayer or anything. So he's got the Marcus Phoenix run here, going towards the dragon. He's opened up the opportunity with the bow. And then
this is where you start to notice that around the edges of, especially on the dragon, his head, when there's motion blur and depth of field. You get right there. You pause and go back a frame. You see around his head. There's no if he was moving, there would be more motion blur around the edges. You wouldn't get like that. That's what makes me think it's hardware rendered, and it's not. This is not like a cinematic pre-rendered thing. This is actually in-engine, playing real time. That kind of artifacting that you see.
Right. Are these like little fire particles we're seeing in the dragon's mouth over here? Is it just little like?
Yeah, that's actually that specularity we were talking about, where it gets weird.
Pixie dust or something.
Yeah, like his tongue is reflective. I think that's what that is. If you can get like a good still frame, it's like the light coming in from the window in his teeth and tongue.
His eyes too.
And and his eyes do the same thing, where they trail.
A little shine.
Yeah.
Is that a little, was that lens flare? What's that coming off of going into the dragon's eye right there?
Yeah, it kind of looks like
four little dots.
Mm-hmm. They were talking a lot about, lens flares and lighting effects like that.
I don't know. They went particle crazy with this stuff.
Blood? Does he hit him? Is that blood flying right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that before.
That's also something you get with hardware particles, is they don't come out looking smooth, and even though they're motion blurred, they have that hard aliased edge to them.
Mm-hmm. When fluids first came out when they first started showing them, they had actual interactive, particles and fluids like almost immediately, and that was back when hardware, in 2002, 2003. I mean, with today's hardware, I'm sure they can calculate that stuff in real time.
I wonder if he's got little like Snoopy ears, because like if he had the hard ears, they wouldn't floop like that. So just a whole other dimension that they got to add to his movement.
Yeah.
Once he got those guys in, then they're swinging independently in his head. He's got little dreadlocks.
Mm-hmm.
This looks more like a game here too. I mean, he's not over animated the character, and
sure. We also, I think we have a clear lock on. Mm-hmm. Like he's obviously like targeting.
But that's like the perfect framing for like a movie too. So
yeah.
I think more for a movie than a game. Like the thing that I don't. It seems kind of bizarre to me is that like I would feel very out of control if I was playing this game and this was my character. Like you're supposed to be the guy in the bottom right there, and he's almost like disappears in this frame. Mm-hmm. And it's like the dragon's taking up so much of the frame. So does the lock-on system automatically get right up in something's face when you target it?
Right.
Why is he only specifically targeting the head? Like is that something? If I wanted to target like his wings or something, like his main body, is that possible? Mm-hmm. There's obviously no. I got the HUD showing my weapon. There's obviously no identifier showing that like you're targeting onto his head. But yeah, one of the only things I think in the trailer that kind of suggests that like, oh, maybe that should have had a HUD element added to it. Everything else I think was done post. But does he have a nose bone there? Is that a little floopy nose or like a spike?
It's like a little horn.
So what about? Just him, like his skin textures and it's got big slathery, gross tongue, and
that's pretty cool actually. Right there, you see
spittle there.
Yeah,
that's definitely something they've been showing us a lot in the recent gen of stuff. Is they've been throwing cloth in whenever they can, big drapes blowing in the wind and stuff like that to show that off, and then. Yeah, the normal mapping they've been able to come up with, creating those extremely high-res textures or models and then breaking it down into low-poly models with really detailed mapping on them. I mean, it would take a lot more power to run that, but that's what they're boasting. I could see it. I hope for it. It looks good.
I wonder if we could maybe see moments, or if you guys remember anything where the dragon has more. You mentioned the smoke was kind of its own thing, and then the arrow hits. Maybe we can go back to that. When the arrow hits hits this column, you said the column automatically becomes a breakable column. Mm-hmm. Like, is there anything to note that this that this dragon, like I guess he doesn't like. I'm looking for something maybe like he flaps his wings and that causes the smoke to go, or like do we actually see any of these rocks like hit him and bounce off? Like, is this something where we see lots of interaction? Again, like the dragon reacts, but it could be kind of a canned thing where it's the same thing as the guy reacting to the dragon spitting fire.
Right. I mean, they do have like a lot of the fire particles. They do a lot to really draw your eye around too, which is a good trick. And also the blowing out of the light kind of throws your eye from. You didn't need to create a detailed break in that pillar at all because it's completely blown out.
Also, the camera shake adds a lot of action feel where there isn't really a whole lot of action going on in the scene.
Sure.
Really all that's going on here is that pillar and the dragon animation. And then the camera shake kind of makes it feel like there's,
I guess wing goes back there, but I wonder if that's back and to the left. But I wonder if that's because of the explosion, if that's something that, or if that's just like, again, like a canned animation that he has.
Yeah, if I'm playing this game and I'm fighting that dragon and I'm low on HP, that's the last thing I would be thinking of, like any of these things we're mentioning. I mean, I gotta say, like, this looks really good, even though like we're nitpicking and like this, we're just emphasizing like these little details here and there, like stress that this is actually real time. It's not a gimmick, even though that might not be a real time gameplay. It is real time rendering.
Right. And then again, like the games are not played that way, where you see this angle where obviously I can't see any of the dragon. We have this kind of suspect camera swivel.
Actually, that shot of him running towards the dragon and the camera rotates around him, that looks like your classic.
So what? Okay, so is this snot? Is this blood? What happened here? What's going on? It's a pretty quick ad there.
Yeah,
that's the
blood.
Fluid. Yeah.
Fluid, yeah.
There's like can splashes of blood, whatever.
Yeah.
And they use that all the time. I mean, even for TV. I mean, you watch Walking Dead.
But that's actually 3D.
Yeah, it's actually 3D rendered fluid
3D voxel,
that you could actually go around theoretically.
But it doesn't like splatter on surfaces or any of that. It's just
right. Or it doesn't look like it's coming out of a cut or a wound.
It dies pretty much immediately right after it's spawned.
Do we see? We don't see any kind of damage. It's still kind of just blurred out.
Right. Well, there's a lot of motion blur.
Yeah, look. I mean, you got all the streaks.
And those are just approximation. That's not true motion blur.
So that's and that's.
You can even see kind of on the column. You can see the lines where the blur cuts off. That's interesting.
It's like frame blending. But did he just go through that? He does.
He does. Look at that.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been some penetration a few times, I think, with the head.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, like you can see part of him clipping through right there.
Yeah.
We'll all be. It's gameplay. Look at that.
Yeah. It's got to be, I mean, within the render. I think that's for sure. Like, I think this is definitely showing what the potential is.
Yeah.
Graphically. I think this is definitely doable.
To say this is real time, like we do stuff all the time where we're just waiting for stuff to render, software render. To say this is real time is, but there's so much work that goes into even getting it to this point, all the texturing, the lighting, and everything. But to have it render out real time in the engine and have it look like this with all the volumetric lighting and everything coming through.
And they use atmosphere a lot in this. If you notice, you can't see a lot of detail all that deep, so you're able to focus all of your detail and your resolution on these images that are even illuminated. I mean, even the night doesn't need much detail right now. In this shot, the dragon can be full detail and it can pay attention to the particles now because he's dark. And the background's completely smoked out.
But speaking of particles, you can kind of see the set amount of particles here. Like they don't really do anything between these frames; they just kind of move with the camera.
Yeah, I think that's another thing.
There's like three or four frames
that they do is they add layers on top that they're compositing in. Like when that fire comes in, where he's hiding behind the wall, and you see the heat distortion. They're adding a lot in the foreground as well. Like put the player in the game, I guess, but.
Well, we were talking about
that stuff's all procedural too.
Right, like how it's going through, like it's taking multi-layers like we would for any 3D process. Like every layer would be separate, the fluids, the characters, the lighting, the specular, the reflections, and then they're blending it all together through a filtration system like any of us have, like Instagram, and it's getting this billowed, skip bleached, interesting look, and then they can even use the alpha channels to create depth of field, and it's this whole kind of different way of like processing games to really create that cinematic look. I think that's what they were kind of getting at in that presentation.
So, Marco, you're Capcom. You're going to the big PS4 event. You have this thing. It was rendered in engine. There's really no way anybody can disprove that. Why not go in and touch it up a little bit? Why not go in and take out? It's like that dragon clipping through that wall was pretty crazy. I didn't notice that before. Like, why not go in and just take that one little pixel out?
Dude, because that's so. I mean,
like
the amount of stuff going on
like
here is so insane that I think that's the last thing that we're thinking about. I mean, this is one of the most impressive things like I've ever seen, like gaming wise ever. Like, and then to say that this is real time, this is like. The Unreal 4 demo was impressive, and the Samaritan demo was impressive, but I think this is more believable. Like, like all those things, like, there was no game running there. Like, this is like, there's some semblance of a game running behind the background here. So, that by itself just makes me really excited. I mean, if Dark Souls 3 looks like this, then sign me up, Like, this is amazing.
You had to mention Dark Souls, didn't you?
I love Dark Souls. Yeah. But Dragon's Dogma 2, whatever, it's Capcom. But like, I think, like, 99% of the people watching this are not going to care about the head going through that column or the rack focus effect having a sharp cutout outline or any of those things that we mentioned. I think, again, like, we're just mentioning them to show you guys that this is actually a game. That's not, just some pre-rendered Killzone 2 shenanigan.
So do you think there's an advantage, Marco, to kind of keeping an air of mystery about this? Do you think Capcom's kind of said their piece and they don't really need to get into specifics? It's like, here's what you're looking at. Will we see this soldier and this dragon in the scene again, or is this what condition do you think this game's going to be in next time we see it?
On screenshots, this game will look amazing. I can tell you that, and the cinematics will look amazing too. The gameplay, will look great too. But there's something about all the stuff that you add to a game when you're trying to achieve cinematic, visual that you just don't use in games. I think people will be. I mean, it's really exciting.
Yeah,
to see stuff like this, and even again, the specs on what they use for this are not what the specs on the final PS4 will be. The PS4 will actually be more powerful than this, so that's cool too. And this is first gen PS4. I mean, if you compare first gen PS3. Even first gen PS2 to the first gen PS2 games to God of War 2, or first gen PS3 games. What was a good PS3 game for first gen PS3 game?
Heavenly Sword.
Yeah, Heavenly Sword to God of War 3, or Ascension. that stuff's crazy. I mean, it's a big jump, and this is the same.
I definitely
thing.
get a powerful Heavenly Sword vibe from these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for this guy. I wonder if Andy Serkis did this guy over here.
Ninja Theory is famous for their facial animation, right?
So what do we think about these guys? I mean, anything unusual here with just the way their skin's moving, or their clothes, the cloth, or the way they're lit? We kind of got the fuzz on this guy, not so much on this guy over here. Yeah, his edges are pretty clear, but we got this kind of force field around this guy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see it wherever there's a lot of depth between the background and the foreground of the character. Close-ups is not so much noticeable.
Yeah, go back to the first shot of the main character, and you'll see around the edges of his face, even further. Here we go. See, animate that, and you see here in the corner,
Yeah.
how that looks like. There's a
On his
force
hand,
field around.
on his
moving,
hand
yeah.
right there, you can
Yeah.
really notice it in front of him, right on his fingers when he puts his hand up. There's
Yeah.
a harsh alias line there. If it were true
Oh,
depth
yeah,
of
like
field,
that.
it would be blurred. It
Just
would
right on his buckle. You kind
Yeah.
of like little Tetris pieces. Yeah.
it would be out of focus there. So
I love this. This media is so incredible, and it's just look at that,
Yeah.
totally failed. No.
I look nitpicking every
Yeah.
little detail. But
Yeah.
Well, the more realistic something looks, the more the little details stand out, and that's the thing about doing these high fidelity games.
I would say for Capcom, this, they're still testing the limits of the hardware themselves. I mean, this is new hardware that they're able to get their hands on and actually see what they can how far they can push it. I mean, I'm thinking this is just the beginning for them. They want to see what it can do, how much it can handle graphically real time. This is a really good test for that. And then on top of that, I guess adding the game in there is just a whole nother level they're gonna explore.
Oh wow, you can see
Mm-hmm.
his arm there. It's pretty. Looks like the N64 right there.
I think that's just a problem when they composite the hardware render together.
Well, I think we pretty much got through the whole thing. Any closing thoughts? Anything? I mean, Marco, you said this is one of the most impressive things you've ever seen. I mean, why specifically? What is it really? Has your opinion about it changed ever since the first time you saw it?
Well, the more I see it, the more things stand out. But yeah, a shot like this. Look at the icicles. It's just. I'm really skeptical about when people boast about technical specs on hardware or anything like that. They show demos like these. I remember when on the PS4 conference they were talking about how you're gonna have what was it, the Heavy Rain guy saying that Heavy Rain characters had 5,000 polys, and then characters on that other robot demo had 15,000. On this next game, they're gonna have 20,000. And then they showed the old dude that had 100,000 polys, all that stuff. And they're saying this stuff, and I'm tabbed out of Minecraft.
Right.
And you don't need all this stuff to make a game compelling. how they're using the fluids and the lighting effects to actually make the game enjoyable. You actually have to, that guy is taking cover behind his column, and that fire is hitting him. Taking cover behind that column may not necessarily be effective because the fire can flow around it. And that's when the physics of the fire and all that stuff in the fluids actually affect the gameplay.
That's great, man. Well, I think we've proven that we can chat about this for hours. Dan, is there anything you wanted to bring up before we wrap it up?
Well, I guess if you like games like this is what's to come. That's what I think. I mean, for sure they're just going to step it up to the whole new level. And I think it's on its way with this demo. I think that's what this proves.
Looks better than Knack.
It's almost here.
Yeah. And I think it's neat, Killzone, they kind of ambiguously just came out and showed this trailer, and think what you will, and this definitely came with, they preceded this with coming out and introducing the engine and what, some of the goals they'd had, and, talked about, all the old stuff that they'd done for the PS1, PS2, and PS3. So they're definitely staking their name on, this is the quality that they're shooting for. Lee, anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, they created this demo to kind of whip it out and show people what they're going to be capable of doing. And they wanted to show lighting, volumetrics, which is the fog everywhere, the fluid interactivity, and I think, and their skin textures with the subsurface scattering, the lighting and the shadowing, everything that they've done, they've kind of shown off here. And if they can't stand up to that, they wouldn't have shown it, I don't think. I think this is definitely what we're going to be looking at. We've got 32 times the amount of RAM in this new system. I mean, it's been long enough. We all know how slow our old iPhones were in comparison to the new ones, or our old computers, that we're going to be seeing stuff that blows this out of the water.
Yeah, 9 years. So.
Yeah, in a couple of years.
And
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Well, it's cool. I think I am more excited about this game than I was when I sat down in this chair and we started this. So hopefully you guys will have more fun in the comments talking about some of the stuff we talked about and comparing stuff and watching this trailer over and over and over, because what else can we do at this point?
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for coming on, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you again soon.
See this and other GT shows and game reviews on the GT Originals iOS app, available now on the App Store.